I'm a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun.
He's inside the school shooting at the gun!
Well, I had to do it because somebody had to do something.
After shooting in the theater, I didn't have a plan of whether to die or not.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time stopping by. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for 100,000 subscribers. I truly cannot put into words how unbelievably grateful I am for all of the support. I am hoping to celebrate this huge milestone in some way, so keep an eye out for that. I also wanted to thank you all for being understanding about me needing a break. Researching this type of content for hours on end each day can get really heavy, and I don't want to become burnt out. I am happy to be back though, and I will say, I missed you all. Just a little disclaimer about this case, it is still open, so there might be information that isn't public yet. Keep this in mind when sections seem to be missing context or details as a whole. I did my best to flesh everything out as well as I could, so I hope that you are still able to gain information from this video. With all of that said, let's jump straight into today's case. Dimitrios Pagourtzis was born on October 12, 2000. Little is known about his childhood as a whole at this time. There is some information known about his life in the few years prior to the shooting though, which I will be focusing on. Dimitrios was listed as being part of the honor roll while in 6th grade, in 2012. According to his Facebook page, Dimitrios began attending Santa Fe High School in August of 2015, about 3 years prior to the attack. CNN.com reports that Dimitrios was on the school's junior varsity football team in 2016. Though he was on the team, many students reported that Dimitrios was quite antisocial. One student in particular said, quote, "He was kind of a quiet kid. Every time you try to start a conversation with him, he just kind of laugh, wouldn't really continue on with the conversation. He didn't like interacting with other students," unquote. According to at least one of his classmates, Dimitrios was apparently bullied not only by other students, but also by a few of the school's staff members. The reason why is not exactly clear, but I read that it was because Dimitrios was known to not have the best personal hygiene. While Dimitrios was described in a slightly negative way by his fellow students, his neighbors generally had good things to say about him. One said, quote, "I've never seen a problem out of that child," unquote. Another neighbor recalled a time that Dimitrios and his younger sister volunteered to help her carry some items into her home. One of Dimitrios' best friends, 17-year-old Stephen Bland, later spoke about him, saying, quote, "He was one of the most responsible people I knew. He didn't drink or do drugs to my knowledge. He was academically proactive, making all A's. He was on the football team, starred in a few games," unquote. Stephen also recalled that Dimitrios would make the 25-minute drive to his house regularly in order to drive Stephen to school. He also said that Dimitrios would often spend his own money on buying Stephen lunch, since he usually could not afford to do it himself. It's worth noting that Stephen mentioned that Dimitrios' dad was not a good father. He described him as a control freak, stating that even when he was out of the country, his father would not let him go over to his friend's house, among many other restrictions. I'll just point out that I didn't really see any other mention of Dimitrios' father being this way, so this is all according to a few quotes I read from Stephen. Anyway, in the time leading up to the shooting, Dimitrios reportedly kept journals detailing his upcoming plans. Unfortunately, they have not been released to the public, so I don't know what the entries consist of exactly. While the contents aren't publicly known, it is widely reported that authorities were able to discern through his journals that Dimitrios was planning a violent attack for a while. Also in his personal journal was evidence that pointed towards the fact that after the attack, Dimitrios was planning to end his own life, which, as we will soon discuss, didn't end up happening. Though Dimitrios was keeping journals with violent entries, it is important to note that no one in his life reported to have noticed any warning signs prior to the horrific attack. With all of that out of the way, let's move on to the shooting. On Friday, May 18th, 2018, at Santa Fe High School in Santa Fe, Texas, about 45 minutes outside Houston, Texas, life was proceeding as normal for the students and staff. The halls were filled with excitement and anticipation as the students and teachers prepared for the upcoming final exams and fast-approaching summer break. Graduation on June 1st was also just around the corner. However, little did the students and staff know that an act of unimaginable horror would ruin this seemingly normal day, changing all of their lives forever in the process. With the news constantly filled with coverage of school shootings, particularly the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida, just a few months earlier, the threat of violence was never far from the minds of the Santa Fe high school community. However, despite this heightened awareness, the idea that it could happen to them seemed impossible. The school day began at 7 a.m. on Friday, May 18, 2018. As students arrived, they were greeted by the usual hustle and bustle of the busy campus. Those who had their first period in the school's art complex quickly shuffled into class, eager to get another day started. The Santa Fe High School's art complex consisted of 4 rooms, including 2 large art rooms, which are referred to as Art Room 1 and Art Room 2. The 2 classrooms were connected by 2 storage rooms and a small lounge area, and were both accessible through these secondary rooms. Art Room 1 and Art Room 2 were the main areas where students would gather for their classes. It's important to note that both rooms had exterior doors leading to a connected outdoor patio. This fact comes up multiple times later in the case, so just keep it in mind. Approximately 20 to 25 students were in each room on that particular morning. One of the teachers, Cynthia Tisdale, was substituting for the regular teacher in Art Room 2. As students entered the rooms, they sat down at their designated tables and took out their assignments. The atmosphere was relaxed, and the students looked forward to their day, as well as the weekend that was just around the corner. A boombox was playing in the background, adding to the atmosphere. Since it was close to the last day of school, the art class had a sense of celebration. Meanwhile, Pagourtzis' violent plan was about to be executed. He arrived at the school with his sinister objective in tow and entered the building. Concealed under his trench coat was a .38 caliber revolver and a Remington Model 870 shotgun, both of which were legally owned by his father. It's important to note that he was violating the school's dress code by wearing the trench coat. However, he had been doing so for months at this point, and never got called out for it. It is reported that the assistant principal, Mr. Kinzer, saw Pagourtzis at this time and told him to get to class. According to him, there was nothing to point to the devastating plan that was about to unfold. Pagourtzis carried on walking, and as he made his way down the hall, now out of sight, he pulled out one of his weapons from underneath his trench coat. Not long after doing so, another staff member, Chris West, observed Pagourtzis walking in the hall carrying the weapon. He quickly retreated to his classroom phone to dial 911 or even the front desk in an attempt to warn somebody about the very obvious danger. He discovered the landline was not working properly at that time, and after attempting to use his cell phone instead, he quickly noticed that he had no cell service inside of his room. He realized that time was of the essence, and that the most effective way to evacuate the school was to pull the fire alarm, so he did just that. Though he made a valiant effort, Pagourtzis was already in the midst of his attack by the time the alarm went off. Jumping back a bit, in Art Room 1, the teacher had just walked out of the room for a moment, leaving the students to do their work. In the meantime, many students were discussing an upsetting game from the night before, where the sports team had just suffered a devastating loss. It was at this time that Pagourtzis made entry to the room. A student that was in Art Room 1, Rome Schuber, later recalled the beginning of the shooting, quote, "All of a sudden it sounds like a firework goes off in the room. That's about as loud as it was. So I'm thinking someone is just doing some dumb prank. And then I look to my left, and as he's ringing off another shot, I realize what's actually going on," unquote. Pagourtzis had entered the classroom, and before anyone had the chance to react, he began to unload one of his 2 weapons, killing 3 students almost instantaneously. The 3 that were shot first were 16-year-old Shanna Fisher, 14-year-old Kimberly Vaughn, and 15-year-old Angelique Ramirez. Also, during this burst of rounds, a student named Clayton Horn was struck in the arm. He later recalled the experience, quote, "The first bullet that I heard, my arm went numb. I turned around and I saw what was going on, and I jumped under a table," unquote. I was unable to find out exactly how long after the shooting began that the fire alarm went off. but from my research, it's safe to say that everything happens in quick succession. Either way, a student named Peter Matuza had just been having a conversation with Angelique moments before she was killed. During his interview, Peter claims that Pagourtzis threw some sort of explosive that went off, blinding him temporarily. He took cover as quickly as he could. Completely shocked and utterly terrified, Rome Schuber also got on the ground and turned the table in front of him on its side to protect himself from the bullets whizzing around the room. By this point, Rome's ears were ringing from the multiple booming shots. Zachary Muahe, yet another student that was in Art Room 1, remembered that almost immediately following the beginning of the attack, he got up and ran towards the door that led outside to the patio. According to him, the door didn't open, so he instead opted to take his chances by escaping through one of the small rooms connected to Art Room 2. He ran through the ceramics closet, where a few students were already occupying the room. Zachary then made his way into Art Room 2 and gave the students inside a brief but direct warning of the danger before leaving the classroom out of its interior exit. The two classrooms were very close together, and even prior to Zachary's warning, the students in Art Room 2 were concerned after hearing the loud bangs coming from the adjoining classroom. Peter Matuza, still in Art Room 1, was hiding under the tables at this point. He recalled looking up through the legs of a chair and locking eyes with Pagourtzis. In Peter's later interview, he stated, quote, "He just looked angry, like there was hatred and rage burning in his eyes, and at the same time there was satisfaction, and he was doing what he prepared himself to do. And," he smiled, "it wasn't like a kind, polite smile, it was a cruel grin. He walked away, he just turned and walked away. He had the perfect opportunity to kill me right there, like I would have been powerless to stop him," unquote. Rome Schuber also peered up from the table he was hiding behind and saw Pagourtzis walk into the lounge room, seemingly heading towards Art Room 2. It was at this point that Rome recalls joining the majority of students rushing towards the back door to try and escape. Luckily, the second attempt to open the door was successful, and as many as 20 students fled the room at this time. Rome Schuber ran out the back door of Art Room 1 and noticed a significant amount of blood on his white shirt. However, he initially thought it belonged to someone else, as he felt no pain. Eventually, Rome realized he had actually been shot in the neck. The bullet had entered behind his ear and exited through the back of his neck. It was not until he realized that he had been shot that he took his shirt off and applied pressure to the bleeding wound. Rome later stated, quote, "Once I stopped and turned around, that's when everything just hit me like a freight train. I was like, that really just happened. He's still in there, 'cause you could still hear out of the open door, the shots going off. So, that was the moment I realized, he's going after everybody in there," unquote. Backing up for just a moment, one of the police officers stationed at the school, John Barnes, was approached by a woman in the hallway who told him that a student had just come to her, saying they heard what sounded like gunshots coming from down the hall towards the art rooms. Barnes didn't think much about it at first, because he could not hear any shots himself, and in the months prior, there was an active shooter lockdown that ultimately turned out to be a false alarm. But just in case, Barnes unholstered his handgun, preparing for the worst. As Officer Barnes began his way down the hallway, the fire alarm sounded, but he still didn't hear any gunshots. As he got a little closer, he recognized the smell of gunpowder filling the air. Back in Art Room 1, Clayton, who had been shot in the arm, was watching as the group of students ran to safety. As much as he wanted to join them, he was worried that the shooter would re-enter the room and he would be shot again before he made it outside. Right then, Pagourtzis did just that. He entered the room and saw Clayton lay back down behind the table. The two of them had known each other for a while and actually played football together. Clayton watched as Pagourtzis got closer, and he attempted to plead with him to stop the attack. As he approached him, Clayton saw an opportunity. He kicked towards Pagourtzis, trying to either disarm or otherwise subdue the shooter. Just as he kicked, Pagourtzis shot the gun, and Clayton was struck for the second time, this time in the leg. Due to the angle, the bullet entered the lower part of his leg and traveled upwards. According to Clayton, he later learned that if the bullet had hit half an inch to the side, it would have struck his femoral artery, and he would have certainly bled out. Clayton then blacked out, and later said that he didn't remember much of what happened in the following moments. He did, however, eventually escape through the open back door and join the other classmates in safety outside. At this point, Clayton was still unaware that he was shot in the arm or the leg. Meanwhile, in Art Room 2, the students were still trying to figure out what was going on. It may not seem like it, but all of this was happening in an extremely short period of time. According to a student that was in the room, Jay Gillard, the class was confused after hearing the loud bangs. She stated, quote, "We didn't know it was gunshots at first. We thought it was people slamming books on the table or playing with the trash can we had in the class. But we officially knew what it was when we smelled the gunpowder," unquote. The students in Art Room 2 quickly began to attempt to escape the room through the exit door that led to the outdoor patio. Upon attempting to open it, they realized that it was locked. When this realization hit, the students in Art Room 2 frantically ran in all directions. Some hid in the ceramics closet, some hid in the storage closet, and some ran out of the room entirely through the interior exit. I did my best to recreate a diagram of the floor plan from maps I saw online, so I hope that it helps you visualize better what is going on. Isabel Laymance was one of the students that went into the ceramics closet. She later recalled this time, quote, "I got pushed into the closet. They all pushed me to the ground and then they closed the doors with the ceramic makers. And we were all just hiding in there. We kept hearing gunshots and everything, and then it got quiet for a little bit," unquote. The sound of gunshots continued to echo as Isabel tried to remain calm and use her cell phone to contact her mother. She knew that every second mattered and wanted to make sure that someone knew there was a shooter at her high school. Isabel was one of the only students that grabbed her cell phone in the chaos, and she wanted the other students trapped in the closet to be able to call their loved ones as well. She quickly spoke to her mom to explain the situation and to tell her she loved her, and against her mother's demands, Isabel hung up so that her classmates could use her phone. Among the students trapped in the other storage closet was the substitute teacher, Cynthia Tisdale. Backing up again, a class was taking place in the gym just down the hall from the two art rooms. Suddenly, the fire alarm went off, signaling the students and teachers to make their way out of the school. At first, they believed that it was just a normal fire drill. In later interviews, one student expressed that she thought it was kind of weird that there would be a drill happening at that time, because they had gone through one just a couple of weeks prior. Either way, the class, along with the two substitute coaches, exited the gym and began walking down the hallway towards the two art rooms that the violent attack was currently taking place in, unbeknownst to them. I am unsure exactly why they did not hear the shots, but it could be a combination of the noise level in the gym, the distance from the art rooms, and the eventual loud alarm going off. John Barnes, the school's officer, was directly behind the group of kids that had just exited the gym. He was still on high alert, since there was supposedly an attack taking place in this general direction. He recalled seeing the kids from the gym acting the way they usually would, like nothing was wrong, which only confused him and made him doubtful that there was actually a shooting taking place. But he did not completely disregard the idea. As they were making their way towards the exit, the gym class, along with John Barnes, finally heard the multiple loud booms, which startled them. According to one student, the group immediately began to run towards the exit, which was directly to the right of the two art rooms. A student in this group, Shelby Guidry, said that as she was passing the hallway that both art rooms were located in, she saw the gunman coming out of one of the rooms. According to her, she hesitated for just a moment while looking at him. She later recalled that Pagourtzis then threw an object at her and another student, which ended up being a homemade pipe bomb. Thankfully, it was poorly made and had a very weak impact upon exploding and didn't harm anyone in close proximity to the blast. Another girl in the group, Priscilla Rodriguez, later stated that even at this time, she was still not completely aware of the immense danger she and her fellow classmates were in. Nevertheless, they continued towards the exit, with Pagourtzis raising his weapon once again. As they were running through the doors, one of the substitute coaches, Ann Perkins, shoved Shelby out of the door and unfortunately sustained fatal gunshot wounds in the process. The other substitute coach, Flo Rice, was just behind Ann Perkins and also sustained multiple gunshot wounds. The two of them stumbled out of the doors and collapsed on the ground. John Barnes witnessed both teachers get shot right in front of him and fall out the exit doors before the rest of their class turned around and ran toward the direction that Barnes had just come from. Barnes quickly ran to the corner of the hallway to get a visual on the shooter, but also to get behind some solid cover. After doing so, somehow, Pagourtzis became aware of his presence behind the wall and leveled his shotgun at the corner. Not knowing his cover was already blown, John Barnes slowly rounded the corner with his handgun raised. But before he could spot the suspect, Pagourtzis fired a round and struck him in the arm, hitting a vital artery and sending his handgun flying out of his hand. Now unarmed, Barnes went for his radio and issued an officer down signal. Luckily, Barnes wasn't the only school officer on duty that day. Gary Forward was another officer at the school who was just down the hall when Barnes first got hit. Officer Forward had to act fast because the wound that John Barnes had sustained was bleeding tremendously. After finding Barnes, Forward pulled out a tourniquet and wrapped it around Barnes's arm. This did not completely stop the bleeding. However, it did buy Barnes some time to be evacuated from the scene. If it wasn't for Forward's quick thinking, it's very likely that Barnes would have bled out from his injury on the hallway floor. Forward then proceeded to drag Barnes away from the threat. Forward later stated, quote, "I've never seen a catastrophic blood loss to that magnitude, ever," unquote. After fleeing from the building, students Shelby and Priscilla both recall looking back and seeing Mrs. Perkins lay on the grass just outside of the door, motionless. Flo Rice was also laying just outside of the school, unable to move due to the multiple wounds on her legs. Astonishingly, the two girls later reported that at this time, they still did not know what was going on. Priscilla said, quote, "As I turned back, I also saw Mrs. Perkins just fall, and I still didn't think anything of it. I was just like, why did she fall? I just thought like, are they putting on a show or something? Like, I didn't know what was happening," unquote. At this time, students were still lying in wait in the interior rooms of the art classrooms. The minutes passed agonizingly slowly for those who were trapped in the storage closet, as Pagourtzis re-entered and began to move back and forth between Art Room 1 and Art Room 2. Isabel, who was still trapped in the ceramics closet, reported that she could hear him moving between the rooms constantly, which meant they never truly knew where he was. Without warning, at one point the shooter raised his voice and shouted, quote, "Surprise, motherfuckers," unquote. Then with a loud burst, the shooter pulled the trigger, sending multiple deafening bullets hurtling through the window on the ceramics closet door. Isabel later stated, quote, "He shot into the window of the closet. Where I was laying down, I was behind a ceramic maker, and my friends were like, on top of me. I could hear the bullets going past my ear, and it would hit the wall and like, dust would go everywhere," unquote. Pagourtzis also randomly shot into the other storage closet. Another one of the students from Art Room 2, Kyle McLeod, was hiding in the ceramics closet along with Isabel and his fellow classmates. His older sister Danica also attended the school, but was nowhere near the site of the attack. Going back just a tiny bit, as Danica sat in her first period class, the fire alarm suddenly went off. Danica and her classmates filed out following the school's procedure. While Danica was leaving the building, she received a text from her brother Kyle at 7:33 a.m., a minute after the shooting is reported to have begun, that read, quote, "There are shooting my classroom," unquote. Danica replied 2 minutes later, quote, "What?" unquote. Immediately, Kyle responded saying, quote, "They are shooting my classroom," unquote. Now alert to the situation, Danica replied with a string of messages which read, quote, "What? Are you okay? Kyle? Don't stop texting me," unquote. Kyle sent a text back saying, quote, "I got hit in the arm," unquote. Danica responded with another string of messages, quote, "Are you okay? No. Kyle?" unquote. She received a series of messages back which read, quote, "Tell them I'm in the art hallway. Get me. Hello. Please. I'm crying and I'm scared," unquote. Danica quickly tried to inform two teachers talking on the grass outside the school that her brother had texted her that there was a gunman in his classroom. However, her teachers brushed her claims aside, stating that there was only a fire drill and to return to where the other students were. Shortly after this, as Danica and the other students and teachers stood outside the building, they heard rapid gunshots emanating from inside. At this moment, the same teachers who had just told Danica that there was no need to worry suddenly instructed everyone to run. Danica quickly reacted and sprinted away as fast as she could. She kept running until she reached a gas station across the street from the school. When Danica was safe from the threat, she texted her younger brother Kyle again. At 3:37, just 4 minutes after the initial message from him, Danica sent Kyle a few messages that read, quote, "I told them, play dead," unquote. He immediately responded saying, quote, "I can't, we're hidden, but we had a sub. And we are hiding, but I think a kid is dead," unquote. Danica replied, quote, "I love you so much," to which Kyle responded, quote, "I love you too," unquote. He sent a few more messages that read, quote, "But I don't think there is a one coming, and we couldn't get outside," unquote. Unfortunately, these messages would be the last that he would ever send. He and another student, Chris Stone, would succumb to their injuries in the ceramics closet. As the shooter continued to linger between the art classrooms, an eerie silence periodically descended upon the closets. However, the shooter always shattered the silence. He sang Queen's iconic track, "Another One Bites the Dust." His voice was filled with a mixture of glee and insanity. During this time, the shooter fired his weapon into the two closets several times. Unfortunately, 6 lives in total would eventually come to an end in the cramped rooms, 2 in the ceramics closet, and another 4 in the other storage closet. Isabel also recalled hearing multiple phones ringing from out in the classroom. She mentioned that Pagourtzis taunted the terrified students by asking if they wanted to come out to answer them. Sergeant Brent Cooley was on his way to a meeting when he heard the officer down radio dispatch from the high school. Without thinking, he immediately made his way over to the school and got there pretty quickly because he was already in that area. Upon arriving, he and a fellow deputy made their way inside the school, where they found a group of officers dragging a bloodied John Barnes down the hallway, away from the attack site. Brent Cooley later stated, quote, "I know what a dead body looks like. He was dead at that point. When they drug him past me, he was dead. Or close to it," unquote. Cooley decided he would follow the blood trail that John Barnes had left after being dragged away. On his way down the hall, he encountered a group of officers that were stationary behind cover. He knew this was not what he was trained to do. He was trained to find and eliminate the threat as quickly as possible in order to save innocent lives. So, he took initiative and moved up to the classrooms all by himself. As time passed, Cooley found himself without a team in the hallway directly outside of both art rooms. He stated that he could hear Pagourtzis yelling at him from the other side of the wall, along with the sound of him firing through the doors and walls of the school. It was around this time that another officer had arrived on scene to support him. It is reported that gunfire was exchanged between the officers and Pagourtzis, but since the exact timeline is unclear, I'm not sure when this actually took place. Anyway, now that he was no longer alone, Cooley and the other officer announced to Pagourtzis that they would be making entry and would shoot to kill if he did not drop his weapon and surrender. As they made their way to one of the classroom doors, the adjacent door to the opposite art room opened, and a pair of surrendering hands emerged from inside, marking the end of the horrific event. According to Cooley, Pagourtzis laid on the floor and crawled over to him, peacefully giving himself up to be apprehended by law enforcement officers at 8:02 a.m., 30 minutes after the shooting began. In an interview, Sergeant Brent Cooley said that as Pagourtzis was crawling toward him, he kept saying, quote, "I didn't think I could do it," unquote. Now that the shooter was securely in custody, first responders entered the art rooms to evacuate the students and render aid to those who were injured inside. Sergeant Brent Cooley recalled a moment that stays with him in his memory, which was when he found 15-year-old Angelique Ramirez while checking the vitals of those found on the floor inside of Art Room 1. He checked Angelique's vitals and quickly noticed that she was still clutching her phone in one of her hands, which kept receiving non-stop incoming calls from her mother. Sergeant Brent Cooley stated, quote, "It's ringing Mom non-stop, and I can't answer it. You know, I can't tell her Mom that I'm with her. I can't tell her Mom, you know, anything," unquote. As I'm sure we can all imagine, witnessing something like this would affect you deeply. John Barnes, the officer who was shot, had to be life-flighted to the nearest hospital and suffered a medical emergency during transit. 1 minute into his trip, his heart stopped, and he needed to be intubated. Rome Schuber and Clayton Horn made a full recovery, but John Barnes remained in critical condition for several days. Despite facing severe injuries, John Barnes ultimately recovered as well, but was forced to resign due to permanent damage to his arm. Flo Rice, who had been shot 6 times in the legs, lay on the grass outside the high school for over 10 minutes waiting for help to arrive. Miraculously, she survived. The same, sadly, cannot be said for the other substitute coach, Ann Perkins. Freshman Robert Montemayor, who lived near the school, helped shelter nearly 15 students at his home after the shooting. His house acted as a refuge where the teenagers could take a sigh of relief that they were alive. Here, they were also able to get into contact with their loved ones to let them know they were okay. As the SWAT team secured the campus of the high school, they conducted a thorough search to ensure that there were no other shooters or weapons present. During this operation, the team discovered several additional explosives that the shooter had brought with him and left in his car. Among the items found were a group of carbon dioxide canisters that had been taped together, as well as a pressure cooker containing an alarm clock and nails. However, the SWAT team did not find any detonation devices or explosive material within these objects, so they were pretty much useless anyway. Crime scene investigators arrived at the scene soon after the SWAT team's initial sweep. An autopsy technician, Jenilyn Saunders, was also there and was interviewed after the fact, sharing her experience. The first victim that she encountered was substitute teacher Ann Perkins. Ann had succumbed to her injuries, having collapsed on the grass just outside the school. A white sheet covered her body. Upon entering the Santa Fe High School's art complex, Jenilyn was greeted by suffocating heat. When the fire alarm was activated, it had the unfortunate consequence of turning off the air conditioning. As I'm sure you know, May is known for its warm weather in Texas, with the average temperature in Santa Fe hovering around 85 degrees, but climbing higher at times. Unfortunately, the combination of the heat outside and the oppressive heat within the building made the air stifling and stagnant. Jenilyn was immediately bombarded with the overwhelming scent of iron from the blood and gunpowder engulfing the crime scene. Jenilyn eventually made her way into Art Room 1. As she stepped through the door, she was immediately struck by the stark contrast between the ordinary scene that it should have been and the tragic events that had just unfolded. According to Jenilyn, on the whiteboard, the date was written in large, bold letters. It read something like, 8.5 days until graduation. It was a reminder that this should have been a time of excitement and anticipation for these students. Cell phones, backpacks, and sketchbooks were on the tables, indicating a seemingly ordinary day for the students and their teachers. However, a longer look at Art Room 1 revealed a darker reality. Blood stained the walls and was pooled and splattered everywhere. Jenilyn's eyes were drawn towards the lifeless bodies of the 3 teenage girls lying motionless on the ground. It was a scene almost too difficult to comprehend. The next section's information is based on the Kids of Santa Fe documentary. Shanna Fisher had been shot a total of 7 times, with 3 shots to the head, 3 shots to the torso, and 1 shot to her arm. Kimberly Vaughn was shot 4 times in the upper torso and her shoulder. Lastly, Angelique Ramirez suffered a single gunshot wound to the head. Upon entering the first storage closet, Jenilyn discovered Sabika Sheikh. She had been shot twice, once in the head and once in the shoulder. The second teenager to be found in the closet was Christian Riley Garcia. He had been struck twice in the torso. Jared Black, another student, was also found in the closet, having been hit in the head, torso, and left arm. Lastly, the body of substitute teacher Cynthia Tisdale was discovered, bearing a gunshot wound to her torso and right arm. Jenilyn said that when she entered the room and discovered their bodies, she noticed that they were covered in paint, likely from when the bullets struck nearby bottles of paint. Jenilyn began searching the ceramic storage closet, where she discovered the body of Kyle McLeod. He had been shot in the right arm, leg, and torso. Additionally, she found another student, Chris Stone, deceased in the ceramics closet. Chris had suffered a gunshot wound to the head. Inside of the rooms, Jenilyn discovered the shooter's 2 weapons, a Remington Model 870 shotgun in the lounge area, and a Rossi .38 caliber snub-nosed revolver lying on the floor of Art Room 1. While Kyle had informed his sister Danica that he had been shot in the arm via text message, it is unknown if he received the other wounds to his leg and torso while amid their conversation, or if he was shot an additional 2 times after he bled out from his initial wound. The McLeod family holds the belief that Kyle initially succumbed to the blood loss from the arm injury and was later shot by the gunman post-mortem. Rhonda, whose daughter Kimberly Vaughn was shot and killed in Art Room 1, worked as a bus driver for the Santa Fe School District. As Rhonda passed by the high school on her route to the elementary school at 8:30 a.m., she noticed the presence of the SWAT team, helicopters, and other law enforcement agencies. This sight caused her concern, and Rhonda attempted to contact her daughter through a text message, but received no response. Unfortunately, by that time, Kimberly had already been fatally shot. Chris Stone's father arrived at the Alamo High School gym, where Santa Fe High School students and staff had gathered at, acting as a safe meeting point following the shooting. However, to his horror, he couldn't locate his son at this time. This news left Chris's father with a sinking feeling, fueling his fears that his son might have been a potential victim. Officials informed Chris's father that he would have been transported to a local hospital if he were not at the Alamo gym. However, they did not specify which hospital he was likely taken to. The lack of information worried Chris's family, who began searching for him at all hospitals in the area. Eventually, they got the confirmation that they were dreading to hear. At a holding facility, an FBI agent asked Chris's family for his name and searched a list before announcing that Chris Stone was confirmed as one of the deceased. His sister, Mercedes, walked into the hallway of the facility and let out a guttural cry. In a state of deep grief and rage, she started punching the wall violently, her knuckles bleeding as everyone around her watched with a mixture of pity and concern. The confirmation of her brother's death in the mass shooting at his school had shattered her world. As Mercedes unleashed her anguish, Chris's mother, unable to contain her pain, reflected on their last interaction. During a later interview, she recalled her last moments with her son through tears. Quote, "It was the night before. He was hungry, and I ordered him pizza, and he almost didn't even go to school Friday. And I know that if I would have told him it was okay, but I said, 'Chris, if you miss, you're gonna have hours to make up at school.' And I know that's why he went. He did the right thing by going, because it was the right thing to do." Unquote. It is widely reported that Chris used himself as a barrier against the door in the ceramics closet, putting his life on the line to save others. On the night of the attack, a vigil was held in honor of the victims of the Santa Fe High School shooting. One of the students from the school expressed the importance of attending such events in order to not forget those who lost their lives in the tragic events of May 18th, 2018. Now, I want to talk about the 10 lives lost on that horrific day. Glenda Ann Perkins was born on November 11th, 1953, and was 64 years old at the time of her death. She would have celebrated her 29th wedding anniversary with her husband soon. She had a vibrant and joyous personality, with a passion for good friends and great wine. She was also said to have cared deeply for her students as well as her friends and family. When asked how he was dealing with the loss of his beloved wife, Ann's husband said, quote, "Well, my first coping strategy was, it was just a bad dream, and I would survive day by day. So, denial was my first tactic. That didn't work too long. And then my next tactic was, okay, you buried her. Was to go out to the cemetery and sit with her, which I still do. But you talk and she doesn't answer back, so we were husband and wife. We slept in the same bed. I could roll over and put my arm on her. You do that because you've done it for 30 years, and you do it and there's nothing there, and it just kind of sinks in after a while." Unquote. Cynthia Olinda Tisdale was born on May 25th, 1954, and was 63 years old when she was killed. She had been married to her husband for 46 years and was a grandmother of 11. It is reported that she made an effort to get to know her students on a personal level on the day of the shooting, even though she was only a substitute teacher. She knew it was important to establish rapport with her students, and she did her best to create a supportive and inclusive classroom environment. Those who knew her describe her as being kind and generous. Cynthia, for the last few years of her life, worked 2 jobs in order to fund her husband's medical needs. He had a life-threatening lung disease, which they were trying to get him treated for. Unfortunately, the costs were high, so they decided to create a GoFundMe. Sadly, it did not gain much traction in the beginning, but after Cynthia's death, the GoFundMe goal was reached and exceeded. Following her death, one of her children said, quote, "We are still in such disbelief that anything good can come out of such a horrific event. My mom always made good come out of bad situations though, and this is no different for her," unquote. 16-year-old Shanna Lorraine Fisher was born on May 9, 2002. She believed that art had the power to uplift and inspire others, and she was determined to impact the world through her art. She is described by those who knew her as a shy but incredibly sweet girl. She reportedly loved to draw, do her makeup, and attend the local Renaissance festival. However, her absolute favorite way to pass time is listed as playing with her dog. In the documentary Santa Fe, the largest unknown mass shooting, it was revealed that the shooter might have targeted Shanna because she had rejected his advances for months. However, one of Shanna's friends who had been interviewed for the film firmly dispelled these rumors. Kimberly Jessica Vaughn was born on August 12, 2003, and was only 14 years old when she passed away. Known for her quick wit and amazing sense of humor, it was even hard for strangers to not love her. She was a member of the Girl Scouts and reportedly had a deep love of cats. Growing up, she often expressed to her mother, Rhonda, that she didn't want children, but wanted to have 20 cats instead. In Kimberly's honor, a fundraiser was organized to support the local animal shelter. Kimberly was learning American Sign Language at the time of her death, and she liked to use it with her mother sometimes, and was the case on the day she was killed. Her mother recalled their last interaction, quote, "I looked over and I said, 'Bye, Kim,' and I went, 'I love you. This was our thing. I love you in ASL,' unquote." 15-year-old Angelique Nicole Ramirez was born on January 26, 2003. Her vibrant spirit and love for standing out made her unforgettable. She always had different colored hair, from turquoise to bright red, and several piercings on her face. She was described as a truly special girl. She was gentle, thoughtful, and empathetic, and always able to bring a smile to anyone's face. Friends of Angelique's, inspired by her memory and love for standing out, decided to dye their hair red to honor her after she died. A family friend of Angelique wrote, quote, "In her short time with us, Angelique proved to be a kind, compassionate, and caring individual. She brought smiles to those who knew her, specifically her mother and younger brother. Angelique's smile was contagious and brightened up any room she walked into. In losing Angelique, her friends and family lost so much. She was so full of life. I couldn't even begin to tell you. Bursting at the seams with rays of pure light," unquote. Aaron Kyle McLeod was 15 years old when he died, born on February 20, 2003. According to his obituary, Kyle also loved to learn about biology and history, and was also a dedicated athlete. It's also said that he loved to watch movies and play games on his PlayStation. Those who knew him said that Kyle was a funny and sweet person, who would always try to make others laugh by telling them a joke or making a funny face. Written on his obituary is, quote, "He was a wonderful son, brother, grandson, and friend. His sweet and loving spirit will be greatly missed by all," unquote. 17-year-old Christopher Jake Stone was born on October 19, 2000. He had an incredible knack for making people laugh, especially his mother. He could make her smile, even when she had reason to be upset with him. Chris's friends and family say that he was an incredibly kind, sweet, and loving young man. He was known for his love of sports, participating in the school's football team, as well as an ultimate frisbee team. Other than playing sports, Chris loved to spend time with his friends, family, and girlfriend, and also liked to play games on his PlayStation. In 2021, Chris received the Young Hero Award posthumously for his selfless actions by blocking the door with his body. Sabika Aziz Sheikh was a 17-year-old Pakistani exchange student and was described as a dedicated and hardworking young woman with aspirations of pursuing a career in civil service and the Pakistan Foreign Office. When Sabika was accepted into the cultural exchange program and discovered that she would be attending Santa Fe High School, she could not have been more excited. Her parents were also extremely proud of her for this opportunity. Despite looking and sounding different from many of her classmates, Sabika was unapologetically herself, embracing her individuality and standing out from the crowd. She would have been returning home to her family in Pakistan in less than 20 days. When Sabika passed away, her parents were not in the United States to plan her funeral, so the Islamic Society of Greater Houston held a service for Sabika at a mosque in Sunburn, Houston, and opened the services to the public. After the service, her body was flown back to Pakistan so that her family could give her a proper burial. Jared Allen Lee Connard Black was born on May 16, 2001, and had just turned 17 years old when he was killed. His birthday party was going to be taking place the day after he died. Jared was remembered by his friends and teachers as an exceptional individual with a kind heart and courage. One of Jared's passions was art. He brought his sketchbooks from home to his art class, where he would spend hours sketching and drawing. His artwork was creative, and he would often proudly showcase his designs to his friends during class. Jared was said to have had an enormous and active imagination, even when he was a child. He was also described as a quiet, caring guy who remained positive at all times. Born on January 8, 2003, Christian Riley Garcia was 15 years old. Christian's hobbies included hunting, fishing, music, and playing football and basketball. He was described as selfless by those who knew him. He aspired to be in the army and demonstrated immense courage when faced with danger. It is reported that he bravely placed himself between the shooter and his classmates, using his body to shield them. By doing so, he aimed to protect his classmates from harm, even at the cost of his own life. In 2020, Christian Riley Garcia posthumously received the Young Hero Award from the Congressional Medal of Honor Society. The shooting at Santa Fe High School that occurred on May 18, 2018, left 10 people dead, several more wounded, and countless others traumatized. Texas Governor Greg Abbott addressed the community following the tragic mass shooting. While acknowledging the crucial role of prayer in the healing process, the governor emphasized that prayer alone would not be sufficient to address the issue of mass shootings. Instead, he called on Texas to take action and prevent such tragedies from occurring again. In the aftermath of the shooting at the high school, Governor Abbott remained a strong advocate for the Second Amendment. However, he also recognized the need for adaptation and regulations regarding gun sales and access to firearms. Recognizing the importance of ensuring public safety, Governor Abbott announced plans to hold a roundtable discussion with school leaders, lawmakers, and gun rights advocates. During the roundtable, the governor expressed his support for adapting regulations that would expedite the background check process for people purchasing guns. Additionally, he stressed the importance of ensuring that individuals posing an immediate danger to the public do not have access to firearms and are unable to purchase weapons. He also signed a bill to increase mental health training for those who are employed at schools. The bill was also set to make access to mental health services for students easier. In the meantime, the response to the shooting at Santa Fe High School reverberated throughout the country. The student-sponsored movement, March for Our Lives, sent members to Santa Fe to offer support and meet with survivors. Families of the victims confronted the Santa Fe School Board following the shooting, outraged that something like this could happen so easily. Chris Stone's sister, Mercedes, also contacted the school district superintendent to inquire about why one of the back doors in the 2 art classrooms was locked during the shooting incident. According to Mercedes, the superintendent responded, quote, "Well, aren't you glad that one was open?" unquote. This response left many questioning the adequacy of security measures in place. During a later interview, Mercedes was asked what she thought about the fact that Chris used his body as a human shield to protect the other students in the ceramics closet. She responded to the question with, quote, "I expect nothing less from him, because, after Parkland had happened, it was an open discussion between my mom and my brother and I. And we spoke to Chris and we said, what would you do in that situation? Because he was the only one in school at that time. He said, if there was no way out, if I knew that a lot of people were going to die, I'd step up and I'd help. I'd do something. I'd rather save many than just myself," unquote. After the shooting, it was revealed that Dimitrios Pagourtzis wore a trench coat to class for several weeks prior to the shooting. Additionally, he carried a duffel bag and suitcase with him, which was against the dress code. Despite this fact, no one ever said anything to him, and he was never made to quit. However, according to several female students from the school, if they were seen exposing their midriff or shoulders, they were immediately written up for going against the dress code. At the time of the shooting, it was May in Texas, with temperatures averaging about 85 degrees in Santa Fe. Despite this, the shooter continued to walk around school grounds wearing a heavy trench coat. No adults at the high school, including the 2 armed officers permanently stationed there, seemingly thought anything was suspicious about Pagourtzis' attire. It appeared that the shooter intentionally wore his trench coat every day in order to acclimate the students, teachers, and staff at the school to his unusual clothing choices. By maintaining a consistent appearance, he aimed to avoid raising any alarms when he hid his weapons underneath on the day of the attack. This plan was executed successfully, as no one at the school suspected anything out of the ordinary on the day of the shooting. None of Pagourtzis' teachers ever observed him writing, drawing, or making disturbing comments. The day before the shooting, Santa Fe High School had a trip to a water park, and by all accounts, Pagourtzis appeared normal and looked as though he was having an enjoyable time, joking around with his friends. Following the shooting, Pagourtzis' parents released a statement expressing their sympathy to the victims, survivors, and their families. It reads, quote, "We are as shocked and confused as anyone else by these events that occurred. We are gratified by the public comments made by other Santa Fe High School students that show Dimitri as we know him, a smart, quiet, sweet boy. While we remain mostly in the dark about the specifics of yesterday's tragedy, what we have learned from media reports seems incompatible with the boy we love. We share the public's hunger for answers as to why this happened, and will await the outcome of the investigation before speaking about these events. We have been and will continue to cooperate with the authorities conducting the investigation, and ask for the public's patience while it moves forward. We ask the public to please extend privacy, both to the victims and to our own family, as all of us try to process these events and begin the healing process," unquote. His family also claimed that their son committed the shooting due to being bullied. However, Pagourtzis' former football coaches have denied these allegations, stating that the shooter was never a victim of bullying that they knew of. Like stated in the beginning of this video, after investigators searched the shooter's room, computer and cell phone following the massacre, they discovered that he had been planning the attack for some time now. Additionally, the shooter had intended to take his own life after the shooting, but ended up turning himself in instead. Newspapers and other media have covered the shooter's social media presence after the shooting. On April 30th, the shooter posted on his Facebook account a picture showing a shirt with the slogan, "Born to Kill." This image was posted just a few weeks before the shooting. Also among his social media posts were photos of a black jacket adorned with several Nazi, communist, fascist, and religious symbols. Investigators later discovered that the shooter had purchased over 100 rounds of ammunition online from a website called luckygunner.com and was not required to verify his age upon purchase. However, federal law prohibits minors from buying such items. The family of Sabika Sheikh filed a lawsuit against the online ammunition dealer, alleging that they were partially responsible since they neglected to verify his age when he purchased the rounds. They did eventually reach a settlement, which is confidential. Sabika's mother said, quote, "Nothing will ever bring Sabika back, but we hope that this agreement sends a message to other sellers of dangerous products. It's your responsibility to prevent your products from ending up in the wrong hands," unquote. Her father also made a statement, quote, "Sabika's killer should never have been able to go online and buy ammunition with a few clicks. I rest easier knowing that this settlement agreement will prevent future illegal sales." A civil lawsuit was also filed in early 2024, this time against Pagourtzis' parents. Overall, the lawsuit claims negligence on their part, alleging that they knew their son was mentally unstable and allowed him relatively easy access to the firearms anyway. The trial was set for May, but has since been postponed to July. Due to Pagourtzis' trial continually being postponed and still having no conclusion to this day, I am only going to briefly talk about it. In February 2019, Pagourtzis appeared in court for the first time since the shooting. His attorneys, hired by his parents, requested a change of venue out of Galveston County. Several months later, the judge determined that the trial would be moved to Richmond County. Since November 2019, the shooter had been in the custody of the North Texas State Hospital after being deemed incompetent to stand trial by 3 experts. On March 11, 2020, after hospital experts submitted a report declaring that he was not competent, nor likely to become so in the next 90 days, the judge signed an order requiring the shooter to remain in mental health treatment for at least 12 months. 2 years later, the shooter was again found incompetent to stand trial and was ordered to stay in the mental hospital for another year. For the 4th time, Pagourtzis was found not competent to stand trial on February 1, 2023. Most recently, in January of 2024, he was yet again found to be incompetent to stand trial, delaying the proceedings once again. Due to his age, the shooter is ineligible for the death penalty or life without parole. If convicted of capital murder, he faces a life sentence with parole eligibility after 40 years. Like I stated previously, there is still no conclusion to this case. I did want to quickly throw in here that according to a probable cause affidavit, Pagourtzis claimed that he spared the lives of students he liked because he wanted his story to be told. On Tuesday, May 29, 2018, Santa Fe high school classes resumed. On that day, police officers and residents of Santa Fe stood outside campus with signs that said, "Santa Fe strong, and united we stand." No backpacks or purses were allowed on the property, and everyone, including students, teachers, and staff, had to show identification before entering. Over 20 police vehicles were parked nearby. These security measures were implemented to ensure the safety of everyone on campus. On Friday, June 1, 2018, the seniors at Santa Fe High School graduated on the football field. It was a momentous occasion for the students and the whole community. As the sun set over the stadium, the graduates walked across the stage, each wearing a white stole in tribute to the victims of the mass shooting that occurred just weeks earlier on May 18th. The graduates were greeted by a montage tribute to the victims of the shooting, featuring personal photos chosen by their families. During the graduation ceremony, the principal of Santa Fe High School addressed the graduating class. He told them, quote, "Great leaders and great nations have emerged from the ashes of some of the greatest tragedies. So go make your life count for something worthy," unquote. In the aftermath of the shooting, the district announced plans to renovate the northwest area of the high school, specifically focusing on the art rooms where the incident occurred, as well as the adjacent hallway. Additionally, a new hallway and counselor's office were installed. The district also revealed a new 2018 to 2019 school year protection plan. Under the new plan, metal detectors will be installed at each school entrance, and police officers will patrol the campus with donated AR-15s equipped with rifle optics. On the 3rd anniversary of the tragic events, May 18, 2021, a memorial called the Unfillable Chair was unveiled. This memorial serves as a reminder of the empty void that was left behind following the deaths of the 10 victims. Designed by 5 current and former students of Santa Fe High School, this chair is a testament to the community's resilience and strength. This memorial is an aluminum chair that stands 8 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and 3 feet deep. The names of all the victims were engraved on the front of the chair. After all, nothing can bring back the 10 innocent lives that were lost that day. Please, remember to keep the victims and their families in your thoughts. To lose your loved one in such a violent and horrific way is unimaginable, and I can't help but feel heartbroken for all of those involved. Thank you all for sticking to the end of today's case. I hope that you found this video to be informative. Please make sure to check out my membership if you are interested in being a part of that. With all of that being said, I hope that you guys have an amazing rest of your day, and please make sure to stay safe.